Darkness fell swiftly, and the wind howled through the barren trees surrounding the ranch, carrying with it the eerie wails of a winter's night. Amid the pitch-black night, the faint glow of a lantern hanging outside the barn was the only light guiding Anna. Her boots stomped heavily over the damp mud, leaving distorted imprints behind, reflecting the turmoil within her. The air was so cold that every breath she took turned into a wisp of white mist, but she paid it no mind. She had to get to the barn. Right now. The heavy wooden door of the barn creaked open, the prolonged sound echoing like a groan of protest against her intrusion. Anna stopped for a moment, holding her breath. In the dim lantern light, she spotted Stellan, the pitch-black horse standing motionless in the centre of the barn. But something was off. Stellan didn't move toward her as he usually did, nor did he let out his familiar, welcoming neigh. Instead, his deep, dark eyes seemed fixed on a shadowy corner of the barn, as though something was lurking there. Anna swallowed hard, a wave of unease rising in her throat. "Stellan," she whispered, her voice hoarse with tension. But the horse didn't react, standing still, his gaze unwavering from the darkness. Anna took slow, cautious steps toward him, her trembling hand reaching out to touch his mane. She could feel the tension in his body, his muscles taut, as though ready to bolt. His eyes stayed locked on that dark corner. She followed his gaze, peering into the shadows. A faint rustling sound broke the silence. At first, it was soft, like the whisper of wind slipping through a crack, but then it grew louder, like something moving across the floor. Anna instinctively took a step back, a chill shooting down her spine. "Is someone there?" Her voice broke the stillness, small and shaky, swallowed up by the vast barn. There was no answer. Then suddenly, from the darkness, a hand shot out, gripping the wooden beam of the barn. Anna screamed, stumbling backward, nearly losing her balance. A figure emerged, their face half hidden in the faint light. It was Evelyn. But gone was her usual composed demeanour. Her eyes were wide with panic, and her lips trembled as though she was trying to speak but couldn't find the words. "Evelyn, what are you doing here at this hour?" Anna demanded, her voice still quivering with fear. Evelyn stepped out of the shadows, her right hand clutching something as if she were hiding it. Anna hesitated, torn between her desire to confront whatever was lurking and her fear of what she might find. But before she could make a decision, the barn door, which had been ajar, suddenly slammed shut with a forceful bang. Both women jumped, their eyes darting toward the door. The lantern swayed violently on its hook, casting chaotic patterns of light and shadow that seemed to dance with the growing tension. "Who's there?" Anna shouted, her voice breaking through the stifling silence. For a moment there was no reply. Then, from outside the barn, came the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate. They crunched against the gravel, drawing closer with each step. Evelyn stepped in front of Anna, her posture rigid and defensive. "Stay back," she said firmly, her voice taking on a tone of authority that Anna had never heard before. "I'll handle this." "No," Anna replied, shaking her head. "I can't just stand here. Stellan—" "Anna, listen to me," Evelyn interrupted, her eyes locking onto Anna's with an intensity that silenced her protests. "If it's who I think it is, you don't want to get involved." Anna blinked, stunned. "Who you think it is? Evelyn, what are you talking about? Do you know who's out there?" But Evelyn didn't answer. Instead, she turned back toward the door, her body tense as the footsteps stopped just outside. Whoever was there was now standing in silence, just beyond the thin wooden barrier. Anna and Evelyn stood frozen in place, their hearts pounding so loudly it seemed to reverberate through the barn. Outside, the sound had stopped, but the air was thick with tension, almost suffocating. Anna could feel her hands trembling even as she tried to steady herself. Evelyn's gaze was sharp, her eyes holding a strange mix of fear and something Anna couldn't quite place, almost as if she were hiding something Anna wasn't meant to know. "We have to go outside," Evelyn said in a low but resolute voice. "If someone's out there, we need to know what they're doing." Anna shook her head, her breaths coming fast and shallow. Just then, a loud noise erupted from the barn. Both Anna and the man froze, turning toward the sound. It was Stellan. The horse let out a powerful, piercing whinny, breaking the oppressive silence of the night. The intensity of it startled the man, and his grip on Anna loosened for a split second. Seizing the opportunity, Anna wrenched herself free and sprinted toward the barn. When she reached the door, Stellan was thrashing inside, slamming his powerful body against the wooden walls as though trying to break free. His eyes burned with a fiery determination, his movements wild and frenzied, as if he was trying to protect her. Anna quickly shut the barn door behind her, leaning against it as she tried to catch her breath. She glanced back, but the man was gone, vanished into the night as if he had never been there. Anna collapsed onto the ground, her chest heaving as adrenaline coursed through her veins. "Evelyn," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Where are you?" Her voice cracked under the weight of her despair, but there was no answer, no sign of Evelyn anywhere. For a moment, she stayed there. The faint glow of the lantern hanging outside the barn did little to illuminate the storm of questions swirling in Anna's mind. Her breaths came in short, shallow gasps, and her heart pounded as if it were trying to break free from her chest. She leaned against the barn door, struggling to regain her composure, but the image of the mysterious man lingered vividly in her mind, as if he were still standing right behind her. Inside the barn, Stellan had yet to calm down, his panicked neighs echoing in the dark. His black eyes glistened with fear, and his hooves struck the ground with restless force, his muscles taut as if he were trying to warn her of a danger she couldn't yet see. "Evelyn." Anna whispered the woman's name, her voice trembling, but only silence responded. She slid down to the ground, hugging her knees, trying to convince herself that Evelyn was fine, that the man was just a harmless drifter. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. Something was happening here, something she couldn't fully grasp, but could feel as keenly as the icy breath of the wind around her. Another sound broke through her thoughts, jerking her back to reality. This time it came from the direction of the house, where a faint glow still spilled from the living room window. She turned her head sharply, her eyes widening with fear. Lucas. The thought of her husband jolted her into action. He might still be there. He might be able to help her find Evelyn, or at the very least confront the man from the shadows. Despite the widening rift between them, Anna had no other choice. She ran toward the house, her boots splashing through freezing puddles of mud. Each step felt like a sharp pain in her chest, a mix of exhaustion and dread for Evelyn's safety. Anna practically burst through the front door, her heavy footsteps echoing through the unnervingly quiet home. "Lucas!" she called out, her voice hoarse from fear and exertion. No reply. The house was eerily silent, so still that she could hear the ticking of the clock in the living room. She hurried into the living room, where a desk lamp cast a warm glow across the room. Lucas's laptop sat on the desk, its screen alive with graphs and spreadsheets. But Lucas himself was nowhere to be seen. "Lucas, where are you?" Anna called again, her voice quieter now, weaker, as if the first shout had drained all her energy. She climbed the stairs, throwing open door after door, but he was gone. Lucas wasn't home. Anna stopped on the landing, her hands gripping the banister for support. She bowed her head, trying to think clearly. Maybe Lucas had left earlier, as he often did, disappearing without a word. But something about the house felt wrong. Not just his absence, but the atmosphere itself, the oppressive stillness, the way everything seemed too quiet, like the house was holding its breath, hiding a secret. She returned to the living room, her eyes sweeping over the desk almost absent-mindedly, until they caught on something. A photograph lay face down on the surface. Her chest tightened. Lucas never kept family photos on his desk, but this one seemed deliberately placed, as though someone had hidden it there. Her hands shook as she reached for it, flipping it over, and what she saw made her nearly drop it. In the photograph was Lucas, but not with her. Standing beside him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder, was Evelyn. Anna's face burned with heat, as if someone had slapped her. What was this? An old photograph, or a message? Her mind raced, scrambling for an explanation. Evelyn had never mentioned any connection to Lucas, but now puzzle pieces began falling into place. Evelyn's strange silence, the cold looks she occasionally cast at Lucas, and now this photo. A wave of anger surged within Anna, tempered only by the sharp, aching sting of betrayal. She gripped the photograph tightly, her knuckles turning white. She was about to storm out to confront Evelyn when a sudden noise froze her in place. The front door opened and then closed. Anna spun around, her eyes wide. Lucas walked in, his face registering surprise as he saw her standing there, clutching the photograph. He hesitated for a moment before stepping toward her, his movements slow and deliberate. "Anna." Lucas's voice broke the silence, calm but heavy with weariness. "What are you doing with that photo?" "Lucas." Anna's voice wavered, trembling with both rage and the heartbreak constricting her throat. "You and Evelyn. What is this? This photo. What does it mean?" She held the picture up as if she were about to throw it at him, but Lucas stood still, watching her without answering. "Answer me." Anna's voice cracked as tears began to stream down her face. "Who is she to you? Why is she here? Why does she know everything about me? Is she the reason you've been so distant from me?" Lucas sighed, raising a hand to his temple as if trying to ease the weight of an unspoken truth. "Anna, you don't understand," he said, his tone filled with a weariness that only angered her more. "Evelyn and I, we have a past, but it's not what you think." "Not what I think? Then explain it to me." Anna took a step closer, her tear-filled eyes boring into his. "Explain why she's here, why she says things to me that you never do." Lucas remained silent for a moment, then sighed again, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I hired Evelyn because I knew she could help you," he finally said, his eyes meeting hers. "I knew you were lonely, Anna. I knew I hurt you. Evelyn was the only person I thought could help you find yourself again." Anna stood there, stunned. His words felt like a knife to her chest. "Help me," she repeated, her voice low and choked with emotion. "You never thought about helping me yourself? Why her?" Lucas didn't reply, and Anna realized she would never get the answer she wanted. Without another word, she turned, clutching the photograph tightly in her hand, and stormed out of the house, leaving Lucas standing alone in the dim light. Outside, the wind howled, biting through her coat and chilling her to the bone. Anna ran toward the barn where she had left Stellan, but when she arrived, the barn door was wide open. She stopped dead in her tracks, her heart pounding in her chest. The barn was empty. Stellan was gone. Anna stood frozen before the barn door, now wide open. The cold air wrapped around her like a suffocating shroud, and the wind howled in eerie whispers. The barn was empty. Stellan, the horse she had come to believe understood her better than anyone, was gone. A wave of panic surged through her. Stellan would never break out on his own, especially not in his earlier agitated state. This wasn't an accident. "Stellan!" Anna's voice echoed into the vast, dark expanse, but only the wind answered. She bolted out of the barn, her eyes desperately scanning the shadows for any trace of the horse. Hoofprints in the damp earth led away from the barn, toward the dense forest that bordered the ranch. She hesitated for a moment, her legs trembling from both the freezing cold and the fear gripping her heart. But she knew that if she didn't act now, she might lose Stellan forever. Her boots sank into the soft ground as she followed the tracks, each step more laboured than the last. The forest loomed closer, its thick canopy swallowing the faint moonlight, leaving the path ahead cloaked in oppressive darkness. Leaves rustled above her, and the wind hissed through the trees like whispers from an unseen world. But Anna pressed on, her focus unwavering. She had to find Stellan. A faint sound broke through the eerie silence, a soft, weak whinny from somewhere ahead. Anna's heart leaped. It was Stellan. "Stellan!" she called out, her voice a mix of desperation and relief. She quickened her pace, ignoring the ache in her legs. The whinny came again, guiding her to a small clearing in the forest. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting a faint ethereal glow on the scene before her. There he was, Stellan. But he wasn't alone. Anna stopped in her tracks. Beside the horse stood a tall figure, their back turned to her. The dim light wasn't enough to reveal much, but the man's still commanding presence sent a chill down her spine. "Who's there?" Anna shouted, her voice trembling with both fear and anger. The man turned slowly. It wasn't Lucas, nor was it the mysterious man she had encountered earlier. His face, pale and almost spectral under the moonlight, sent shivers through her. His eyes, unnaturally bright and cold, locked onto hers with a calm that felt anything but reassuring. A faint, enigmatic smile played on his lips, but he said nothing. Stellan stood motionless beside him, eerily calm, as though the horse was already familiar with the man's presence. "Who are you? What are you doing with Stellan?" Anna demanded, forcing herself to take a step forward even as her body screamed at her to run. The man didn't answer. Instead, he gently stroked Stellan's mane, his movements deliberate and almost tender. "You've come farther than I expected, Anna," he said finally, his voice deep and strange, as though he knew everything about her. Anna froze, her breath hitching. How did he know her name? She'd never seen him before in her life. She took another hesitant step forward, but the look in his eyes stopped her. His gaze wasn't just cold, it was penetrating, as though he could see straight into her soul and uncover every secret she'd ever tried to bury. "Stellan belongs to me," the man said, his voice steady and unthreatened, as though her presence didn't matter. "He always has. You're just passing through, a temporary traveller in his life." "No!" Anna's voice cracked, her eyes filling with tears of frustration and despair. "Stellan doesn't belong to you. You have no right. He's all I have left." Her voice broke, and the tears she'd been holding back streamed down her face, uncontrollable. The man said nothing. He simply stood there, his expression a mix of pity and detachment. "Anna," he said softly, his tone almost sympathetic. "You don't understand, do you? This was never about you. It's about what you've forgotten, what you're running from." His words cut through her like a knife. Anna stood paralyzed, unable to respond. The man turned his attention back to Stellan and, with a gentle tug, began leading the horse toward the deeper shadows of the forest. "Wait!" Anna cried, lunging forward, but her legs felt as though they were bound in place. The man glanced back at her one last time, his cryptic smile still lingering. "If you want to find Stellan," he said, "find yourself first. Otherwise, everything will slip away." And then, like a spectre, he and Stellan vanished into the darkness. Anna collapsed to her knees, her chest heaving as her heart pounded against her ribcage. Her mind spun with questions. How did he know her name? Who was he? Where had he taken Stellan? She sat there in the cold, the wind whipping around her like whispers of warning, reminding her that everything was slipping out of her control. When Anna finally dragged herself back to the ranch, her legs barely able to carry her, everything was different. The barn was still empty, the house shrouded in darkness, and Lucas was nowhere to be found. But as she stepped into the living room, her eyes fell on the desk. The photograph of Lucas and Evelyn was gone, replaced by another. This time, the photograph was of her and Stellan. But something was wrong. Her face in the picture was vacant, her eyes hollow and lifeless, while Stellan's gaze was sharp and penetrating, staring straight at her as if trying to convey a message. Anna's hands shook as she picked up the photo, nearly dropping it from the tremor in her fingers. She turned it over and scrawled on the back in jagged handwriting were the words, "Find the truth within yourself before it's too late." Anna stumbled backward, her breath catching in her throat. It felt as though the walls of the house were closing in around her. The silence wasn't just quiet, it was oppressive, suffocating. She turned sharply, her instincts screaming that someone, or something, was watching her. For the first time, Anna realized that the darkness surrounding her wasn't just the absence of light. It was alive, an entity that was consuming everything she thought she understood. The story ends here, leaving Anna haunted by unanswerable questions and the audience captivated, wondering, who was the man? What is Stellan's true purpose? And can Anna uncover the truth? Or will she be lost in the ever-deepening mystery?